Again, I think it's skewed in the sense we're talking about the corporate world. We could talk about the union world too, and their influence in elections and using members' dues for issuing advocacy positions that members don't necessarily agree with.
And the old restrictions apply to unions as well as corporations.
Right. So like I said, we shouldn't just be talking about the corporations and how they influence the election. This is going to be all money from both sides can go at it.
Yes.
Now, one thing I think is really interesting is if you go back to the history of why we're banning contributions from corporations, not contributions, I'm sorry, for them to advocate for advocacy. The Tillman Act in 1907 was brought up by a very liberal senator in the South from the Democrat Party who didn't like, that advocated for segregation. Corporations at the time who gave heavily to the Republican Party did not like segregation because they thought it made their product more expensive to sell. So they were advocating for abolition. And their money, because that was going to influence the debate, Tillman decided to limit the contributions from corporations because that wasn't a message they wanted to hear. So again, corporations sometimes advocate for positions that could be quite honorable. They aren't just always looking to corrupt the political system. They should be part of the political speech.
Well, we're not looking at so much whether something is evil or not evil, but simply what kind of influence do they have on the political process? How do they distort the actual will of the people? And by having the sheer amount of power through money that corporations have, they are, I believe, able to already have been able to distort the process. No question that money has influence. What this ruling does, and it's a ruling, quite frankly, that goes against 100 years of Supreme Court precedent. What this ruling does is it makes a bad situation that much worse.
I got to correct that. It's not a 100-year situation. The 100 years was to limit contributions from corporations to candidates. That was not touched by this ruling. What this ruling did is just 20 years ago allow corporations and unions to be able to issue advocacy ads. They still cannot contribute to candidates.
Well, that's
so
true,
that's some
but
of the
if you take the
misinformation
Supreme
out there.
Court precedent and you apply that, it's only a matter of time before those restrictions
and
are
also
struck
we don't
down
know
as
what
well.
role the politicians or the candidates play in working with these corporations. In fact, it's almost like it gives the candidate a defense if a corporation were to spend $10 million and really, I mean, listen, if you really want to hurt a candidate, you say some really negative things at the last minute.
Yeah.
The candidate on the other side of the person being slammed by the businesses or the unions is going to be able to say, wait, I had nothing to do with that. I think that responsibility is taken away and we lose that, and I think it's significant.
And Ray I think makes an excellent point, because this is the worst of both worlds. You are able to have corporations spend a lot of money, sometimes behind the facade of some trumped-up organization that they created.
527.
At least when you had candidates accepting donations and they were making the negative ads, at least there's some kind of accountability. So you have the same kind of distorted process on the political system, and yet you lose all the accountability that at least you used to have when it was the candidates themselves doing the ads.
Okay, so let's ask this question. How will this affect voting? When voters look at politics today, many people would argue, obviously, with low voter turnout. This last election we just had in Chicago is a perfect example. We had under 30% of the people came out to vote in this last primary. And so, what I'm most interested in is I'm somewhat interested in the constitutional precedent, that sort of thing, in the Supreme Court. But really, what I'm interested in is how this affects real people at the end of the day. And the question is, do you think? And I'll ask all of you all this question, do you think this will either decrease or increase people's perception that they can have an influence on their political process?
Without a doubt, it'll decrease, because the fact of the matter is that corporations will have an even greater influence than they already do on the making of policy. It'll be the interest of corporations that Congress is looking toward, and not the interests of average people. You see that in the healthcare debate right now. Why are we having such a difficult time getting any kind of meaningful health care reform enacted, despite the fact that every poll shows that people support the public option, they support universal health care? It's because the powerful insurance companies, because the healthcare industry has united against it, and they give campaign donations, not only to Republicans, but to Democrats as well. and as a result, the will of the people is thwarted.
Yeah, now Raphael, I know, we have opened up a box here. We're going to jump on this healthcare thing, so I see him over there like, So, but let's stay on the campaign finance thing. Well, go ahead.
Again, I would just say that we have as much money on the left advocating for different issues, and it's not always coming from the right.
Yeah.
So I think the issue should be that just whether corporate or not-for-profit or union money should be involved at all, not just always, being a negative for the Democrats. I think voter turnout is, in the end, I think what's wrong with our system. It's not the money, it's not the big corporations or the unions, it's people being disengaged from the process. 30% voter turnout is pathetic.
And why are they disengaged, Raphael? Why do you think they were disengaged?
For a variety of reasons.
One reason is because they don't think anyone's listening to them.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any influence.
Yeah.
Because it's all the powerful interests that have the influence, and not the average people.
But a lot of groups
yeah.
like,
Blame
excuse me,
people.
a lot of
No, yeah.
people like the ACLU
Yeah.
or the NAACP or the Sierra Club or even the the Association of Retired People, the AARP, represent small individual people collectively. And that's why they will have also more influence by being able to issue advocacy ads on behalf of small people.
Yes.
It's not always corporations that are just advocating for the rich and powerful.
Yeah.
They collectively organize to represent the small people.
And I would make the argument that it's also the parties that have a lot to do with people being disengaged from the process. I mean, there are, George Washington warned about this in his farewell address, that when we got to the point where parties basically wielded an unbelievable amount of power, which they do. I mean, we're right now talking about who's going to be our lieutenant governor based on what the Democratic Party is going to decide, not necessarily what the people have decided or want to decide or whatever. This is a real issue. So I think, once again, as I love to say in most of these debates, is that there's a lot of blame to go around for a lot of these things. And I think that...
And actually, the parties have less power now than they ever have in
but they're still a lot more powerful than individuals are, and that's for sure.
And in fact, what this is going to do is this is going to create more pressure to repeal laws that limit the amount of soft money that political parties can use in political campaigns. The argument's going to be made, and you can't really argue against it, that hey, you're giving corporations basically a blank check to spend whatever they want on political advocacy. Then political parties should be given that same blank check. And basically what you're doing is you're throwing out over the course of the next few years, you're going to be throwing out all of the limits on money in campaigns, and it's going to be the wild, wild west.
And there's one other side that we haven't even talked about that has to do with voter turnout. Regardless of what the cause of voter turnout is, fact is it's low, and part of it has to do with the lack of either public interest, and there are many people who go into a voting booth not even knowing about any of the issues or the candidates, voting on names. Yeah. Suddenly you throw in this ability for some corporation to spend a fortune to interject instant information for this uneducated constituency, some of them. I think they could skewer the vote. People are going to be influenced not by what the candidates say, and I agree, it's not a Republican-Democratic thing, and I agree the unions, should live under the same restrictions, but my big fear is that we're going to get more slanted information from corporations. I only disagree with one thing that Raphael said, that the news media, idealistically, the news media is supposed to be fair. Now, it always isn't, but the truth is, they live by a code of conduct that elected officials don't say they live by.
But Ray,
we're supposed to be fair.
Let's be real, okay? The media, as Raphael said, they're corporations also, and at the end of the day, they want to make money.
And it supports.
But that's
what you're saying is basically it supports exactly what I've been saying, is that over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you've seen a growing influence on the corporate elites, on the decision-making of Congress and the legislature on all levels, from the city councils all the way up to the U.S. Congress. Yeah. And this Supreme Court decision, this decision to overturn years of settled law, will only contribute to the growing influence of the corporate elite in American politics.
When I get my information, I still would rather get it from the media than from a corporate entity.